And welcome back. This week we have a very special guest. We are talking about some ways to deck build and play against the grain. I'm Levi.
I'm Jacoby.
And I'm Joe.
And this is the Thought Vessel. Welcome to the show. And I'm not going to keep anyone else waiting. Prior to this, we have a very special guest on here. We have BonzaiEntertainment, a deviant deck brewer extraordinaire. He is joining us on the show today to talk about building against the grain. Welcome in, Bonzai.
Hey, thanks for having me very much, guys.
Before we get into it, just kind of getting a little bit of your background here. Why don't you tell the audience here a little bit about what you do and kind of how everything came to be?
Oh, I've been playing Magic off and on since about Odyssey, when they had tombstones in the top corner to show that the spell had flashback. So it's been a minute. And it's a game I've always enjoyed. I've picked it up and put it down a couple times in the past, but I've been playing pretty continuously since around Avacyn Restored, give or take a few sets. I found Commander somewhere along the way. Somebody told me about this great format that existed where we played 100 cards of just one copy, so I didn't have to outspend everybody at the table to try to win, which was really appealing to me. But I moved shortly after that, so I didn't actually get to play for a couple more years. I played a little bit more standard and whatnot along the way. I finally decided to just bite the bullet and build a couple of decks, pit them against each other a couple times, and then I was just hooked after that.
I find out when someone is starting to learn how to play Magic or whatever it might be, is I always like to know which friend was the person that decided you had too much expendable income and you needed to get into this type of game.
I was on the younger side, so preteen age, so it was probably one of my parents. It's like, hey, here's 2 decks, play this with somebody and see what it's like. I remember it was a disaster because I had Sandstone Needle and I didn't want it to come in tapped. I wanted to be able to play that 2 mana immediately. So I said I wasn't going to play by that rule. And then the person I was against decided to just pick up and just walk off. So those unused for a little bit till I was a little bit more mature in what I wanted to do.
That is fair. I think we all had one thing like that. I think when I initially started playing, I thought that Dark Ritual was you got it and basically like a repeatable Black Lotus. Like you got the 3 mana all the time. And it was cumulative, like you could store it up. Like I had the whole idea wrong. It was terrible. I think we all have something like that. So when you first started playing, did you jump right into standard right away? Was it just kind of kitchen table stuff?
Very much homebrew kitchen table till college. Yeah.
That's where it was at, I think, for a lot of people. It's just doing the kitchen table, playing with whatever. Like, hey, I've got this dumb deck of just all these draft chaff vampires on. Let's go. I think that's just where the appetite for Commander came from, to be honest. With just a lot of people that wanted a way to use all these terrible cards in one location.
I remember getting really excited about a $20 bundle off Amazon or eBay somewhere with just hundreds of cards. Didn't know what they were, didn't know what I was going to get. And then they just rip through the whole thing in an afternoon with a couple friends.
Absolutely. Hey, Bonzai, I think you will appreciate this little nugget of information I don't know if I've even shared on this podcast before. My first deck was cringe as heck. I got into Magic playing Haunt creatures.
Oh, all right.
Do you have any idea? Have you ever heard of the Haunt creatures? Do you know what they are? I assume.
Yeah. They come in, they do a thing, and then when they leave, you gotta it's not really enchant another creature, and when it dies, it does a thing, but you haunt it instead of enchant it.
Yeah, it was that jank magic.
Kind of funny. I think it was Taylor Swift that always said, like, embrace the cringe, because that means you're a better person than you were before. I think it's the same thing with deck building. Like, you look back at some of the stuff, like, what the heck was I doing?
Look, everybody that I've been in physical meat space with has seen my I am cringe, but I am free shirt.
I was going to reference that, yeah. I was talking about you today, Joe. I literally quoted you saying that to my coworkers.
Sorry, meat space?
Yes. We are currently in digital space. Meat space is physical space. No, it's funnier to say meat space.
He's thinking
because
in the third dimension, he's like, I can touch you. And he reaches out with his hands.
Because we are made of meat.
Okay, not M-E-E-T, M-E-A-T. Okay.
Yeah, meat space.
I low-key think you might be a cannibal.
Well, guess what? That makes me a fine young cannibal.
Before we get too far into our topic here, we do actually have one of our segments that we like to do on the show, which is Am I the Archenemy? So we look at very complicated or weird situations that pop up on Reddit and all over the internet and dive in to see if the person was actually being the archenemy. Joe, take it away.
Am I the archenemy for playing my new Magic deck? Hey guys, I recently have gotten into... Jesus. Right off the bat. I haven't even finished the story. Crazy. Hey, guys.
Sorry, I had flat. Yeah.
Thrice is the charm. Hey, guys. I recently have gotten into Magic the Gathering, and I got done playing what, in my opinion, is the worst game of Magic ever. This girl, let's call her Jane, is part of my commander pod I played with tonight, and at first was really nice. We talked in with her and her friends, and she seemed really cool. So we got started, and I got off to a way big lead early on. Mind you, I'm playing a pre-con deck, one made by Magic to start learning to play, and Jane has a commander that destroys any card if left on the field, and is playing way above the rest of the people on the table. I start swinging my cards, spreading the damage, trying to let the other opponents play their decks, and suddenly Jane starts ramping fast. For those who don't play, it means she's getting really strong like me, and I start playing spells that get rid of her commander and creatures. I notice as the game goes on, she starts to get really irritable and starts to target my card specifically. I think it's just because she is losing and I'm the biggest threat, so I just laugh and keep playing with the rest of the group, who is really nice. I keep going and explain my card as they keep coming along with how my board wipes and creature removal works, so people don't have to read my cards. Now here is where I think I might be the a-hole. Jane plays a card that says she wins if she has 4 card types on the field her next upkeep, and I play 2 cards that help remove those cards so she doesn't win. Again, explaining what they do for the pod. She then looks at me and starts yelling at me that I want to win this game and you better not play another card to stop me. The rest of the group and I go quiet, and at first I thought it was joking. I explained that I just wanted to play till the new guy and I were the last ones left so he could win a free ticket to possibly get a free deck. She tells me in no uncertain terms that if I play another card that removes creatures that she is going to scoop and not play. I sit there for a long time stunned for a second steal myself and play a card to help me win. Jane blows up at me yelling that fine, the new guy can have the ticket, I'm done, and storms off from the table. I asked the other guys who were her friends at the table what was that for. I thought we were just having fun to have one of them say he had no clue and the other person to say she just hates mansplaining cards and that she was complaining to him the whole game. I'm kinda at a loss because I just said what my cards did and was having fun with everyone else, but I might have been accidentally sexist and pissed her off. Am I the arch enemy for playing my new Magic deck and doing well? Too long didn't read. I played a new pre-con I owned, explained how my cards worked to people at the table, and got yelled at for trying to stop Jane from winning because the way I read my cards out was sexist. That's a lot to unpack.
There's a couple things here. The first, I think the card that he was referencing was Liliana's Contract. That's what I'm guessing. That's at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. I think that's what he refers to. I think this is a newer player, just from his explanations of things and talking about a pre-con, like, oh, it's a deck built made for players that are trying to get into the game and stuff. So I think it might have been when he's explaining stuff, it's just this is the first time he's seen any of these cards. He assumes the table is in the same boat with him, where it can be annoying to have someone explain what a Mind Stone is when everyone knows what that Mana Rock does.
My issue here is that it sounds like the cards he was explaining were the interaction pieces.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where because we are only given the snippets of the one side of the game, we don't know what was actually being explained because there's a possibility that this player was like, well, I'm going to explain everything. Or it could be, as they said, they were just explaining like the interaction pieces, which even at tables that I've normally been playing with everybody, sometimes they want the effect just read out or even just the name so that they can look it up on spell table at that time. I think it's a very key thing that it didn't come from the player herself that she hated the mansplaining. It came from one of her friends that just had an idea of what might have happened. Well, the other friend literally was like, I don't know.
I thought she said that she was saying that she hated mansplaining cards, like off to the side. I thought that was a conversation that happened. Maybe it was like a previous game.
So to reread the sentence, I thought we were just having fun to have one of them say he had no clue and the other person to say she just hates mansplaining cards and that she was complaining to him the whole game.
With that context, Joe, we have now established that the person was the lone female, because it's this person who's reading the story, and he asked two other gentlemen, as they both said him. The lone girl did not feel up to challenging the idea of being mansplained on, and the other friends possibly did not feel obligated to say anything or just didn't know how, is one possible take. Maybe though not, hey, this is path to exile, blah blah blah. It could be like, I exile, you find a land, target this. Some other way to say it that just seems worse than it might have been.
Bonzai, you had something?
I get the impression this guy is probably smarter or a little bit more involved in the game than a lot of other people. And he kind of like shows off a little bit with it, which, we all do time to time. When he starts talking about we were just having fun, people get a little weird when you're having fun, but there's prizes on the line. I will say that. Your idea of just having fun and having fun to let someone else win, that can rub people the wrong way, especially if you just met them.
It is important that this is a newer player. So I don't know if it was them being cocksure and they're playing the game.
I thought the friend was the newer player.
No, the person who wrote the post is the newer player, because they even started off, hey guys, I recently have gotten into Magic.
Okay.
Also, prizing on the line is definitely an interesting point, because if it was a noticeable thing that she didn't like the mansplaining, but spoke up and says, I want to win this game and you better not play another card to stop me, very angrily, is a weird take.
I'm sure it happens. That seemed like almost like 80s teen movie villain kind of stuff to say. Like, that's just really weird. Kind of a thing. Like, I'm going to win this game. Don't stop me. Like, that's telling the opposing soccer team to not use a goalie. That's just kind of strange. If you're trying to win, people are going to stop you if they can. Like, that's usually how the game works. But what do you think about the comment with mansplaining in this context? The group collectively.
Let's go with Bonzai first.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of responsible for themselves at the table. And if you're not having a good time or you're feeling insulted, you have strategies of dealing with that. You can ask someone, hey, I don't need you to read the card to me, or can you not read the cards? I understand what they do. Sometimes you just got to I don't want to say put people in their place, but you just got to direct them on how you want to be treated. And people can be accommodating, I found.
And we have players, even in our local group, that they do not handle being read cards audibly. Like, it doesn't register with them. They just need to be shown the card to read it themselves. So that would be a colossal waste of time for them. So I guess it just kind of depends.
I can also understand why they might read the card even if someone didn't, because one, a 4-player pod of Commander, and there's 2 new players at that pod. Because while this player who made the post is relatively new, he also pointed out that there was another new player at the pod. Reading out the card is not just for him, it's for the entire table, because there's another new player that also doesn't understand probably what that card does.
Also, rereading this little segment, it sounds like they had a plan. Somebody, whether it be the 2 new players or maybe at least 3 of the participants, talking about having the new player elect, like, quote unquote, a free dub or whatever they wanted to word it as, so that they can get another new deck, because that's the prize support, is another deck. In the context said in the final paragraph or whatever, it sounded like this was a consensus between everyone except for this one person. She was not about the vibe. She wanted to win, and maybe she would have given him the deck. But it sounded like they're like, hey, we're playing for fun. The objective is to get this person a deck. And the person writing was like, well, the funnest way to get the deck is to have you win it, because you feel like you earned it. All possible perspective. Who knows? But like, it sounded like more than just himself wanted the deck to go to the new player. That wasn't him.
Just PSA for all the local game stores out there, all 2 of you that listen in. If you're going to do prize support for Commander Knights or Commander products, either do everyone gets the exact same thing no matter what, it's participation. You can do a one-on-one kind of dual commander, or do like a pre-con league where you can add stuff as you go. But if you have one player who just has a pre-con, doesn't really know what they're doing, the other person who really wants to win comes in with a borderline CDH deck, you're going to have a bad time. that is just such an awkward situation to put all players involved in. Like, just don't do it.
I actually think that while the poster is not the arch enemy for reading out the cards, I think the actual thing that she might have been pissed off about is the fact that he goes and explains that he is pretty much going to sandbag winning the game for himself to have the other new player win.
I could see that being annoying. You feel like you're trying your best and someone just kind of playing with their food. That's not necessarily a fun spot to be in.
Well, it also means that you're not trying to just win it for yourself, which I think might have been a little bit more understandable at that point. It is, I'm not even trying to win this game. I'm trying to have this other person win this game and not you, which kind of like spits in the face of the game as it is, and especially with the prize support on the line. I can see that one being more archenemy than the other.
I wouldn't call any of this mansplaining, though. I don't think it was because she was a female or anything. I think it was just a matter of he was explaining his cards. He's a new player and he's got a precon. That's kind of what people do.
And Bonzai, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm really against sandbagging in a lot of ways, especially when you tell people about it. That's the worst way to make somebody feel like they won a game even when they shouldn't have. If you're going to do it, don't tell anybody you're going to do it. But overall, don't do it. And if he's just going to give the win to somebody else have the possibility of winning a deck, just take the win. And if you win the deck, just hand it off to your buddy, because that's the goal. There's no reason to sandbag.
And I think that might have been lost in the sauce with this entire post, especially with them ending it saying, well, I was just explaining how my cards worked and got yelled at from trying to stop the one player, but totally missed the plot where they explained that they were trying to sandbag. So at least archenemy for that, not archenemy for explaining the cards.
The likely answer is still you are, but not for the reasons you thought you were posting for.
I don't think he's particularly an archenemy in this situation. Telling someone that they're sandbagging, especially in a multiplayer political aspect, I think he just doesn't know better at this point because he's newer. I think you just need to find better beginner-friendly players to play with. Because there are certain players that are veterans in this game. They just don't want to hold your hand through a whole Commander game. That's just not what they're interested in doing. They want to do more complex stuff, and that's fine. And there's other players that are a lot more welcoming to the players. And there's some players like me where some days I want to play more complex. Some days if there's a new player, I'll tone it down and we'll just kind of be at a chill level. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling that day. And Bonzai, what was your thoughts as far as archenemy or not archenemy?
I think they're both the archenemy.
Both archenemy. Okay.
Both archenemy, yeah. I remember seeing somebody got disqualified from a tournament a few months ago for having an outburst at the table. Whether you agree with it or not, you're an adult, more or less. I mean, I guess I can't speak to the ages of the participants, but you can control yourself in public. If you get frustrated, you can walk away. I mean, I don't want to take away from whatever she was feeling at the time or the secondhand story that she was feeling mansplained to. We're all adults. We're all very accommodating people. We can address things before they get to this point.
For sure. And there might be some behind the scenes with her going on that doesn't even involve the world of Magic. So yeah, that's a good point. Moving on here, today we are talking about brewing against the grain. Bonzai, as this is more your expertise, Joe is our resident jank builder, as it were. To you, when you always talk about making Magic weird, what does that mean for you?
From a philosophical level, it's doing stuff that I haven't seen done before, mashing up two ideas that don't really go well together, or you think they don't go well together. A lot of it's just preconceived notions. It's, hey, blue does not do Voltron very well. Did this deck build a little while ago. And I see you guys kind of nodding like, yeah, that's absolutely true. Blue can't do Voltron it's a garbage idea. But no, it actually works. And see more head shakes. See, I can already tell. Pairing ideas that don't necessarily go together and trying to find the best of both worlds.
When you get these ideas of kind of wanting to build against the grain here, we've talked about this on the show as far as bottom up or top down. Do you normally have like a certain commander in which you're wanting to go a different way with? Or is there a particular concept and you find a commander after the fact to kind of fit what you're trying to do?
It's all completely different. Every deck is unique in its genesis. When I did my green burn deck, I knew I wanted to do green burn, and I didn't have like an idea of who was going to lead it. I just knew it needed to be mono green. So I picked a very big beater, Silvas, to lead that one. And he's like my backup plan. If I can't get enough, because there's not a huge number of burn cards in green, I can kind of keep the pressure off of me with commander damage. So he was my backup plan. and he's got regenerate, so I can drop him out there pretty early, and I don't have to worry about him getting removed nearly as much as I would most other commanders.
For our listeners back home, what does Sylvaas do?
He's just like an 8/5 elemental with trample, and you can pay green to regenerate him. So I'm never afraid to throw him into combat. I'm not afraid of a board wipe. I just keep 1 or 2 forests untapped, and I'm ready to just rumble.
I'm sure you don't get a lot of pre-game attention with a commander like that either, versus like if you had like Urza or Chulane or something in the command zone.
No, he's very unassuming. He's an uncommon, so a lot of people see an uncommon commander and they're like, oh, there's not a lot going on there. Or it's weaker in some fashion.
Usually the unassuming commanders is where that's gonna lie. And especially if you actually go above that and do a commander that a lot of people do know, like how I tried to do a Boros mill deck and used Osgear, because a lot of the good mill that you can do in Boros is artifacts. So doubling up on that with Osgear was like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You can hide your plan in your colors with artifacts.
Let's kind of dive in a little bit farther on this mono green deck. So with the burn, you said you didn't have a lot of support as far as like a lot of green burn spells. Like what did you do to kind of fill out the 99 as it were? It's kind of a smaller type to work with. Did you add like a secondary theme? I understand there was some Voltron aspects in your command zone. How do you flesh out a tactic that doesn't have a lot of support?
When I kind of tackle these projects, I have a mentality of being prepared to pay more, usually when it comes to mana, but sometimes when it comes to cash too. Because when there's not a lot of something out there, it tends to go a little bit up in price. It was easy to find the first couple burn spells like Hurricane and whatnot, but then I stumbled upon a card from Portal, Three Kingdoms, borrowing the East Wind, and it was like $80. And I said, there's no way I'm paying $80 for this. I had to do without, essentially. Eventually, I got my hands on one, not in English, so that was a trade-off.
That can happen. Joe?
My question is pretty much a following up on just cards in the 99. Is there any particular tool that you use when you're trying to do this, like Scryfall, EDH Rec, what have you?
I'll generally start on EDH Rec to see if somebody's already doing an idea. And if there's a lot of people already doing it, especially for my Make EDH Weird series, I'll abandon it and I'll move on to something else. After that, I try to stay away from EDH Rec because I don't want to get too many ideas or get kind of a groupthink going on. This actually stems from a friend of mine. He's a writer, and he said once he starts writing a project in a theme, he just stops consuming media from that. So if he's working on a sci-fi story, he just stops all the sci-fi stuff just so he can have his own ideas and not be influenced by anything else. So that's kind of stuck with me over the years. After that, though, it's a lot of Scryfall. It used to be Gatherer, but it's a little bit more cumbersome for what I'm doing. And then a lot of it is what do I have in my collection too, especially when I start the first draft of the deck and I want to get just a couple reps in to see if it's worth doing anything with.
The cheapest cards are the ones you already own. That's definitely a good way to go about it.
Pre-internet fabulousness, the sources of Scryfall, EDH Rec, and such, were you into Commander or any other format? And if you were, what was your source for looking at cards back then? Did you do what I did, where you had all of the sets, just their booklets, and you would hover through the cards?
It was a lot of building with what I had, especially very early on. When I was playing more heavily in Standard, especially around like Return to Ravnica block, Khans of Tarkir, all that stuff, I was consuming media, we'll say. So it was mostly articles, written stuff. But I didn't really like the net decking. That was something I identified that I did not care for very early on when I started to play competitively in tournaments. I was there more for fun, even though there were prizes online, which is interesting considering our last topic. But I was just there to have a good time and do stuff. So playing Soul Tithe in RTR when nobody was playing that card, just to do it, it had its own level of enjoyment for me. I was a little casting shade, I guess the kids would say. When somebody would beat me and I kind of felt bad about it, I'm like, oh, is that so-and-so's deck from online? Because, I'd follow Star City Games or whatever else. It's like, oh, yeah, that just won a tournament. Oh, yeah, did you do anything different with it? I'm like, oh, I added 2 cards. I'm like, oh, 2 cards. Yeah, wow. And then move on. I don't want to be that kind of sarcastic person anymore. You play your way, I'm going to play my way. And if the stars align and I get a win, all the better for it.
At the end of the day, even if you are net decking, a lot of it is still how do you pilot? And if you can't pilot it well, then why net deck in the first place?
Absolutely.
Bonzai truly be out. You're just going, you're basic, and just giving up the good old thumbs up and walks away.
I've evolved since then, so I'm a better person now.
What's kind of funny is with net decking, I feel like we get some of it in Commander, probably more or less in the CDH space than we do in casual, but like we actually have had friends that will net deck like very expensive Commander decks that are like very popular commanders and then just not know how the cards work together. And then we play them and they always get frustrated that they kept losing. Kind of funny to see that kind of come full circle. But I think that the 60 card format where going against the grain and bring what you want, I think is fine. They don't have as many issues with hostile players and stuff, I feel, as they do in 4-player, because with removal and attacking and stuff, you only have one direction you can go. When you play a creature that's higher power, you almost expect it to get removed. That's just kind of the nature of the game as it comes in the competitive side of things. The 60 card.
I think some people have the why me mentality. You get one thing blown up, okay, you get 2 things blown up, 3 things blown up, you get your board wiped. It's like, all right, why is this happening to me? Why are you throwing all of this at me? Some people will thrive on it. It's like, hey, I'm doing something right. That's why everybody's killing my stuff and sending it to the graveyard. Some people just haven't gotten to that point yet.
It's always weird, too, with Commander, because everyone looks at the game a little bit differently, where you might get some why me situations where there's someone who, like, you believe is obviously far and away about to win, and they're destroying your stuff. But the other player might have more information that the person that looks like they're going to win may not, or they have a way to stop it or something. So it always adds a little bit more complexity in that regard.
There's also just sometimes people do not do proper threat assessment, so that does kind of happen as well. I would say it's more of like a 30% of missed threat assessment, 70% just playing correctly.
There's also people don't want to keep in mind that, hey, I'm making this play based off of what could be in your hand or what you could draw. Just because you have no Soul Ring or Sensei's Divining Top does not mean I don't remove your Aetherflux Reservoir. Just because you don't have it doesn't mean you couldn't have it.
That is true. Kind of transitioning back here. As far as the topics are concerned, we'll just stick with the mono green deck for right now. Mono green burn.
You brought up a point about, do I have any kind of like sub things, some categories in there? I actually do. I pushed into energy very early on because there were a couple energy enablers and stuff that fed off energy that did a little bit of the burn. I added in cards that I wouldn't normally to that idea specifically to support energy, like Aether Hub. So, hey, just comes in, makes it energy. I don't need it to make green mana, so I'll just kind of let it sit there.
But when you play these types of games, adding the multiple themes together, do you ever have certain times with these types of decks where you get a lot of kind of pieces for the different themes at the same time where they just don't kind of mesh together?
Absolutely, especially in the first or second iteration of a deck. And then you just kind of go back to the drawing board and tweak stuff here and there. It was frustrating very early on, but now I find kind of amusing when I get more of my plan B cards and not my plan A cards, when people like misidentify the deck and what it's supposed to do. That happened with the green deck. I got a whole bunch of energy stuff out there. And there's like, oh, is this an energy deck? No, it's a burn deck. You just haven't seen a hurricane yet. So I'm just going to keep hitting you with the turret and just keep tapping it for 3 damage or Dynavolt power. The burn will get there, but right now it's just an energy deck to you.
I definitely get that. You've talked about the first and second iteration. When you post an article online, what version of the deck are we seeing at that point? Do you put like a rough draft, the original blog, or is this something that's been tested for a while? Like, how does this usually go for you?
Pretty much everything in the Make EDH Weird Again series has been tested to a point where I'm comfortable showing it online. It's been built in paper, and I've played it at my game store, maybe played it online a couple times. After that, if I've not actually played it and it's just a rough draft, I try to make that very clear early on in the article and then foot stomp that again at the end to let everybody know, hey, this is just a wacky idea I've had. Go run with it. I don't like sharing rough drafts with people so much because at some point I want people to have a little confidence in what I say that this is a good idea. And if I just give you the idea that's not tested, I can't be sure that it's going to actually work or not. I have tried to work some of that into some of my new articles by giving you, here's what I'm doing right now, and here's what I plan on doing in the future. My Zinnia Valley's Voice deck. Right now, It's built for clones, so I have a lot of clone effects in there. Yeah, it's great. I just played it on stream with KJ the Hero for the first time. Had a great time, ramped a bunch. It was awesome. But I've got a new idea that I've been working on with it with persistent petitioners, where I'm going to make it a mill deck and just keep making tons and tons of those tokens out there and tap them and mill somebody out with persistent petitioners because I can have 30 of them in my deck anyway. So make another 1/1 copy.
I had a question to pose you. You like to build interesting, wacky decks. You want to make Magic weird. Have you ever, in any of your local play groups or in just people you meet, whether it's at cons or over when you join other people for stuff, do you ever challenge other people to, like, I built this weird deck. I would like you to build something weird. Give them maybe a challenge or a basis. You should build this Ratadrabic 0 legendaries deck and see how you can make it function. Something interesting.
Yeah, I see what you're going at. At this point, no, I moved a few months ago, so I don't have a dedicated play group right now. I got a couple friends in the area, but we don't get together with any kind of regularity. So I'm seeing very new faces, which for content creation, for testing these decks out against different people and different strategies and different commanders, it's very nice because I get to see a fresh take every time, at least once a night. When I was really starting out, the surprise factor for a deck was very important for me. I don't want you to know what this is doing because the idea is new and different and you haven't seen it. That doesn't fly in game 2. You've seen what I'm doing. The surprise factor is gone. So if my deck can't hang without that, it's really not going to stick around.
I guess kind of in the corporate realm, I'll ask a star question here. Tell me about a time that you had a deck or a deck concept recently that just kind of fell flat. You just couldn't make it work. And what were you trying to do?
I have been doing 4-color decks right now. Been off and on with them, trying to get something working. I've been beating my head against the wall to get this Brea deck. It's going to be vehicles based, and I'm using partners to kind of get the ball rolling. Partners with, particularly, because I can just go tutor up another creature and I have it ready to go and it can crew the vehicle. If I can shuffle that original partner back in after it dies, then I can just recast that one and then retutor for the one that I just shuffled back into my deck. I've had a little success with the partners with mechanic in a old equipment heavy deck. And that was kind of my genesis of ideas. It was, hey, I need enough equipment, I need enough creatures to equip them to, and I need enough mana to make it all happen. So I kind of ported that over to the Brea vehicles deck. It was not doing what I wanted it to do. And now all of a sudden I was told, hey, we're going back to whatever they're calling the plane now, and there's going to be a whole bunch of vehicles in it. Cool. I'll slow roll this one a little bit. I'll have the shell of what I've got, and then I'll see what tools come out in the new set. That Brea idea has been sticking with me for almost a year. It wasn't clicking the way I wanted it to on paper or pen to paper.
I think sometimes too, when you're building decks, sometimes you're just a little bit of ahead of your time with a concept and just one set comes out and you just get a flood of things. I remember when we went to Ixalan the first time with Geshath, everyone wanted to play the dino and it was getting a lot of popularity, but all the dinosaurs you could play, there was like 5 or 6 good ones and the rest of them were kind of common, uncommon. I wouldn't really want to play this, but ever since then, we've gotten a ton of good dinosaurs where that deck is substantially better than it used to be.
Or you want to build around a specific card that came out, such as with Murders of Karlov Manor with Slime Against Humanity, and you think you have a pretty good deck idea with it, but you may just need to go back to the drawing board to really make it fine, like how I built an Essex deck and wanted to make the Slimes Against Humanity clone spells instead.
I have an example. When you take a card that doesn't need to be in Magic, aka Madgar, the hidden strings, and then you discover that the zone you think it does stuff from, not actually a factor. Does not function at all the way anyone expects it to function.
I've not messed around with that. I didn't really get into the unsets, so my familiarity with what they're doing is on the lower end.
I'll try to make it brief. Madgar is this Minotaur performer. He's Rakdos. He has an activated ability. Grab an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. You make it an unnamed 3/3 and you note what it was. And when it hits people, you cast that spell. You go, hey, it's a bolt. I cast lightning bolt when it makes contact with players. Where would you think you cast the spell from?
From exile?
You would think that.
Yeah.
That would be a fair assessment. You cast it from the graveyard.
Oh.
That's so good.
It's on your field. Flip it, you show what it is, you cast it from your yard because that's the last place it was noted. It was so nonchalant. Why does this do this? They made a rule, only references him in this ability, says it's from the yard. It's a numbered rule that literally says Magar's effect is cast from yard. They had to make
This is companion zone. Yeah, okay. This is like they create something new and they gotta tweak the rules just to make this thing fit. Where do companions go? Well, we don't really have a sideboard, so they're not gonna live in Commander. We don't have a wish board. Where do you put your companion? All right, hey, the companion zone. It's not the command zone. It's like adjacent. They're next door neighbors. They can bang on the wall and tell the other one to turn the music down.
I can also see how that can work in concept. If you like flip it, it goes to the graveyard, you cast it from the graveyard, and then like add resolution, quote unquote, it then goes face down on the field back as the unnamed 3/3. That's kind of what I'm seeing with how they're trying to make that rule. And it's just all one state-based effect.
That would make more sense if it didn't say make a copy, cast the copy for free.
Looking forward here. We usually take a long time before posting an article. What is the quickest turnaround you've had on a legendary creature from like spoiler to actually getting a deck on your blog?
Within 2 months, I think is the quickest. Kellen was like that, the red-white Kellen. I was banging my head against the wall for that whole set to try to find something kind of different. Bernard, the ginger sculptor, he was going to be my go-to, and then everybody was doing golems with it. So, okay, I can't just do wing splicer and whatever splicer like I really wanted to. So I walked away from it, and I'm like, I'm going to find something in this damn set to me. Oh, sorry. In this set to...
You can cuss here. It's fine.
Okay, cool.
I just edited it out.
I'll try to make it easy for you. I'm going to make something in this set work. And, okay, cool. I keep coming back to this adventure card. There's really 2 cards in one. There's double my opportunity. I can get something working with it. It took probably 2 or 3 goes through the entire spoiler. And then I'm just like, oh, curses are auras. I can just tutor up a whole bunch of curses. Let me just curse everybody through the whole game. Okay. And then it just went from there. Like, hey, how do I get Kellen back to my hand to keep using Birthright Boon? What is the best sequence for this? So, and then it kind of took a life of its own. And then I was so inspired with it. And I had a lot of curses to begin with, so I could start testing pretty early on. And I was very confident with the deck and the idea, and I went with it. There were a couple holes with it because I went so fast, ways to close out the game and finish it. But yeah, that deck was, from conception to the draft being written, was probably the shortest turnaround.
And I'm sure that deck got a lot of help from the one enchantment from Doctor Who that says you can cast instants and sorceries from your graveyard.
No, because I don't play a lot of unsets. I think I've limited myself.
It wasn't an unset. It's just an official.
Not an unset. Universes Beyond. I've tried to stick with just Wizards IP for the most part, so I didn't buy the set when it comes out. It's going to bite me in the end because there's just so many new sets coming out that are not Magic IP and not Wizards IP that I'm going to get left behind as a creator if I don't use some interesting cards out there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting podcast topic down the line is, yeah, at some point, because this is definitely a losing battle if half of the standard sets moving forward are going to be not Wizards IP anymore. What do we do as far as like create a format that's only Wizards IP? Or do you just try to move beyond that and just kind of embrace it and just have SpongeBob on the field next to Megatron and Doctor Who, which is actually a thing that can happen now. This is no longer like satire.
I don't need a Magic card in my Magic deck. Is Magic a game? Is it just a set of rules to turn things sideways? That's a very philosophical point that I don't think I'm prepared to talk about right now, but it's a discussion we're all having on some level.
Absolutely. I guess I have a couple more questions here. I'll go with, of all the decks that you've done with your block to this point, which one are you the most proud of?
Well, I keep talking about it. So my original 5 all hold a very important place for me. These were the decks that I said, hey, I want to get into content creation. I want to do things that are a little different. I sat on them a little bit longer. I played those decks a little bit longer. Those are my Orvar clone deck, my Green Burn deck. I have a Boros deck that plays like a blue deck. So it's looking to mill and do a lot of counterspell stuff. Companion Bonanza. That one actually just got published because I lost the original deck list. So I didn't publish it for probably a year and a half. Just kind of sat on it and then retweaked it. That's a labor of love twice over. There's one more in there. Oh, my Red Infect deck. So those were my first 5. So those hold a special place for me. And once I could prove to myself that I could do it, especially the companion deck, because I didn't care for companions, could do something that I didn't really personally enjoy, but I thought would be interesting to build and share with everybody else. I really like Green Burn. I really like Killing Curses, Merkul. I do a whole theft thing where I'm stealing your creatures and I'm sacrificing them so I can keep an enchantment copy for myself. And now Zinnia, that's been a lot of fun to play, especially in person, because I'm just making so many different things that you have. But the deck that I always come back to when I need like game 2 or game 3 and we're getting ready to run is my Aurelia deck. It's a Boros Blink deck, so I'm doing a lot of Cloud Shifting and Ephemerates to summon Impact Tremors and Eldrazi Displacer stuff.
Now you're talking my language.
That is my favorite deck to play because Aurelia takes the deck in a very interesting direction where it's very combat and double up on combats, and I can really soften up life totals with a lot of those Impact Tremors. But then I didn't realize that I had an infinite combo at the time, and the combo, I don't have a tutor for it, but I'm using Felidar and the Wispeaver Angel. Yeah, Guardian and Wispeaver Angel or Restoration Angel, and I can just go back and forth infinitely. So it doesn't do anything on its own, and I can't tutor for it. But if I have Perforos or Impact Tremors, it's game over.
A lot of Blink decks, it's just a matter of just compounding synergy on top of itself until it inevitably ends, usually in some type of combo. It's just that's how that strategy works.
And now I pose a possible thought here. We've asked you a bunch of questions. I would like to venture to guess, would you have a question for each of us?
I have a question that I'd like to ask a lot of play groups and people that I meet, and it's opinions on land destruction, because I think it's this pariah in the format, and I don't think it needs to be. So it's it's a little bit of a loaded topic, which if you can get people to have strong feelings about something, you get good conversation out of it. So land destruction, and more specifically, mass land destruction.
Man, crazy that you have an ally in Jacoby on this one.
Yeah, right.
I did a whole New Year's resolution last year's episode on December for 2023. I fulfilled my promise of making a land destruction deck that no one outright hated.
Okay.
With the introduction of deserts and other archetypes, we got Yuma, who was like hey, when your deserts die, so on and so forth. I was able to bring a positive spin to land destruction, but I have been on the hate land train for like 2-3 years now. They deserve it. Stab the lands.
Just to clarify for those listening at home, in case it's been a while since you've seen the episode. So normally what his commander will do is anytime one of his deserts gets destroyed, he gets to create a big old token. What he'll do is he'll cast Armageddon, so no one is able to... Jacoby?
That is not technically what it does.
Does it cast it from the graveyard? When you think you cast
you must stay. If a desert were to go to your graveyard from anywhere, meaning mill, your hand, or from the field, you then make a 4/2 plant with reach.
Moral of the story, you cast Armageddon, you blow up all the lands, which gets rid of a lot of deserts, which adds a ton of attacking power on the board, and usually it's enough raw power to just get in and punch everyone before they can recover.
And as far as land destruction, targeted land destruction, absolutely important, because if you want to win a game, sometimes you have to destroy Gaia's Cradle. Or, in my case, one of my favorite utility lands, Field of the Dead. It's the whole reason I keep building a whole lot of commander decks with so many unique lands, so that it can trigger Field of the Dead so often.
Can't kill me with Maze's End if I eat it.
Maze's End, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Academy Ruins. Like, there's a lot of just very powerful utility lands. Throwing Tron off of its ability. I think you have to have something in your deck that can deal with lands. Even we have a friend that plays Glacial Chasm all the time. You just know that Glacial Chasm is going to happen, so you need to have at least a Beast Within or something in the deck that can deal with it, or else he's going to get that down. He's going to pay 1 or 2 life, and by the time that you could actually take him out of the game, he's already killed everybody. Because he does a lot of non-combat damage stuff.
But as far as mass land destruction, that's where it becomes a little bit tricky, because that usually can result in so many misplays. Because there are just going to be people that don't understand when they should do it, or even if they think that it is the right play, they just come out and show that they've pretty much handed the game to somebody else entirely. So I think at least with that needs a little bit more education as far as any kind of magic is concerned, before it could probably get into the same relevancy as targeted land destruction.
I look at it as, and I'll kind of work my way back into the conversation here, but philosophically, when I'm looking at Commander, I think it's done best when you're in a small play group in which you know everyone's decks. And obviously, people brew new decks and you have to kind of learn and adapt. But you start kind of teching against each other a little bit and you kind of learn each other's strategies. And then I'm going to put something in my deck to stop your deck. And then you're going to have to adjust. And we're kind of go back and forth and kind of develop our own internal meta. I think that's when Commander's at its best. Personally, if I go against someone that I know is going to run mass landing destruction, now I've got to be aware of that. Maybe I'm not as greedy with my ramping. I'm going to throw in some mana rocks, maybe some mana dorks and things to kind of balance it out. So if he does blow up all the lands, I still have 5 or 6 mana worth of mana rocks off to the side. And I can keep going and they're going to lose that exchange.
And also to keep in mind that on the opposite spectrum, you as the person wielding this idea of I'm going to blow up all the lands, you would need to, instead of tech against it, you need to learn to tech with it. You have to, if you don't win off of Armageddon, the next turn rotation, you need to know what tech you would need to apply to keep the train still going. Even if the train is now at a snail's pace, the train must continue or you lose. If you can't progress yourself in a way with your plays or what you have to continue after, you shouldn't be playing.
That's why Kalia is primarily Armageddon decks, because Kalia is, I'm going to swing Dragon, Demon, or Angel.
Kalia is a great one. Narset, casting free spells off the top of your deck. That's a fantastic one for Armageddon. Prismatic Bridge would be great too. So there's a lot, anything that doesn't really care about mana at some point is going to be really good for it.
I've seen a single Titania land destruction deck.
I've not seen that myself. I really enjoy Fall of the Thran in a deck because at the end of the day, you're going to get something back, but you aren't going to kill me in those next 2 turns because you want those 4 lands coming back your way. I'll keep that saga going and I'll keep alive. Even if I'll draw a little bit of hate or anger from the table, cool. You're still not going to kill me because you want those next 2 lands back. I think a lot of players tend to overlook that we run so many artifact ramp pieces, so many rocks out there, and they're less desirable late game, but it opens up a way that you can be happy to play a rock, play your Soul Ring on turn 7 after you get a whole bunch of lands. I don't really play Soul Ring, so that's not me, but Mindstone, because we already brought that one up.
Or, Thought Vessel.
Oh, a little plug? I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta plug it while they're already watching it almost at the end.
Remember, kids, you're not the meanie for casting and successfully resolving an Armageddon. You're a jerk for casting, resolving Armageddon into Vandal Blast into a board wipe.
Just making that nobody has anything is kind of...
Just cast World Fire. If you want to be cool like that, cast the big funny spell.
Well, at that point, though, with Vandal Blast and Armageddon, you spent 9 mana. At that point, just get the win, my dude.
Or they paid 5 mana and then Dream Halts.
I've heard stories for years now of somebody throwing an Armageddon off and then no plan for it, but somebody casts Teferi's Protection in response. And then you think you're gonna be in a good spot after that, but then hey, somebody else has the whole board left over. I've not come across it personally, but I know it's out there. And I think that's probably even funnier of a story because, hey, I cast this spell that everybody hates and I feel like I can capitalize off of it. And then somebody else responds and then wins. And that's the kind of stuff that you talk about a year after the fact that it happened, or it shows up on a Thought Vessel episode. Somebody did this wacky thing, they thought they were going to win, and I swept the rug out from under them, and here we are.
Or the newest spell, Purge Protection.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've got more effects that do stuff like that. I don't think we need to be as afraid of land destruction. I think there's different levels of it, like the targeted, then you've got your Ruination, where I'm going to blow up all your non-basics, and then I'm just going to blow up everything. Find where your comfort level is on that gradient and live in it, and don't be afraid to push left or right a little bit.
It is really interesting. I think it's a lot stronger of a point for more experienced groups. But if you have somebody that's playing a pre-con or some kind of a newer player that is just not prepared to handle that type of card, and they just didn't know that existed, that could definitely be a rude awakening for them for sure. Final question I have, technically 2 questions. First one is, we've kind of seen power creep as of late with just kind of the frequency of the prints increasing. Have you found it harder to brew against the grain with kind of the general, what I consider a 7 power level rising as we go?
Yes and no. Been doing this for almost 2 years now, either published or just trying to get stuff, a backlog before I got moving. There were a lot less filled in strategies back then, but there are still different and unique ways to take ideas. And I think Kellen is a good example of that, where we had a lot of curses from those Innistrad days, but nobody would have thought to cast a Boros deck doing that. Now, I needed that piece of tech in Kellen, but there's no reason I couldn't have run an Enchantress deck in red and white that was curse heavy. He just kind of smoothed it out and made things a little bit easier and kind of opened the door for me to say, hey, what if I took this Enchantress theme in this direction? But I will say, when I got started, Commander was considered the 75% format. There was a lot of room in your deck for pet cards and things that wanted to do outside of the competitive, not necessarily a good stuff pile, but a 75% format. And as new cards get printed, some of those holes get filled, and you can build intentionally towards that 75% mentality, or you can kind of embrace the sense that, hey, my deck wanted to do this thing and I had this gap in it, and I can kind of fill in that gap, and that weird thing, I can keep making it happen. The Aether Flux Reservoir was great for my burn deck because it's going to zap somebody for 50 life. There's no reason I can't throw that in a green deck, and I did.
Final question I have, at least for the newer player that might be listening, someone who has built some precons, is looking to kind of brew their own decks, and this podcast might be some inspiration to try to brew against the grain a little bit. What kind of advice do you have for that newer player, but has some experience underneath their belt?
It's going to be multifaceted. It's going to be consume. Just take in as many articles and podcasts and just consume as much content as you can very early on and figure out what your comfort level is. Don't be afraid to stop and think for yourself. Like, you've got all these ideas, you've got all these pieces now, make it your own. The second piece I'd say is a collection is not built in a day. Don't be afraid to have an idea and then let it sit on the shelf for a little bit and then come back to it when you're ready or when more stuff exists for what you want to do. An eternal format is great for that because I don't have to worry about rotation. If I have something in a shoebox for 3 years, hey, I might be an idiot because I didn't sell it when it was worth $80, or, it might work out really well because I have this great idea that I can use it for, when I stumble upon it.
And we never know. That is all the questions we had today. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah, it was a great time. Thank you for having me. It's fun to be on the other side and not just listening.
I'm glad you had a good time. Joe, you had something?
No, I was agreeing.
For our
mutual
Sure
agreement.
it so rarely happens. You just threw me off guard, Joe. With that, I'm sure a lot of our we talked about a lot of different decks on the show. I'm sure a lot of our fans are going to want to go and kind of take a look at those deck lists themselves. Where can we find you?
Oh, lots of places. I post pretty regularly on Twitter or X, depending on how old you are, what you want to call it. So I'm at BonzaiEnt. I'm also on Moxfield. So again, at BonzaiEnt. You can find me there. More and more of my decks make it their way over there because it's just very easy to, see what cards are and read them there. But the best place is always on my site, BonzaiEntertainment, entertainment fully spelled out. Links are on all my sites, or you can just Google it for ease. And I post every other week. I've been doing that minus breaks for Christmas for almost 2 years now. And I got a backlog of stuff that I need to write up, from the holidays, from all this playing that I actually got to do.
And we'll make sure your links are in the doobly-doo.
There we go.
We'll put all the links in the show notes here, just so it'll be a little bit easier for our listeners and readers to consume that information. I think that is all the time we have.
I have a slight question. Who is reading this podcast?
We also have articles, Joe.
Who's reading this podcast?
You know what?
Well, if they're in the show notes, they're reading the podcast.
I want you to know, I have a deaf grandfather. I will hand him this Word document. Do not tempt me.
Oh my God.
There we go. Well, that is all the time we have. As always, thank you so much, Bonzai, for joining us. I'm Levi.
I'm Jacoby.
And I'm Joe.
And this has been The Thought Vessel. Thank you for tuning into the show. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye, readers.